Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are going to take a look at my horror movie collection. That's right, my DVDs and Blu Rays. It's an ever expanding collection. I'm always on the lookout for more, and I don't even have any way near as many as I want. But we're going to start it off with some old school horror. So we're going to start it off, folks, with Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. An amazing classic from the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, one of the all-time great directors. Next up, folks, is my favorite all-time psychological horror film, and that is Rosemary's Baby, starring a great performance by Mia Farrow, and it's directed by Roman Polanski. Next up, we have William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, starring Linda Blair, in one of the scariest movies ever made, no question about it. It's just an A-plus awesome film. Next, we have Phantasm, the one that started it all. This is an absolutely great Blu-ray. If any of you guys don't have this yet, you need to add this to your collection. Awesome movie. Next up, we have The Legend of Lizzie Borden, starring Elizabeth Montgomery, in this true crime story. It's really interesting. Next up, we have The Great Psycho. What a masterpiece of horror by Alfred Hitchcock, and that's my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, starring Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh. And then we have the very underrated sequels, in my opinion, and that is Psycho 2, Psycho 3, and Psycho 4, The Beginning. I enjoy every one of them. Next up, we have the classic Universal Monsters collection, the Legacy collection, if you will. And this one is The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. as the tragic character of Lawrence Talbot. And each one of these features all the subsequent sequels in the series, and that's what I really enjoy. I bust these out every Halloween. Next up, of course, you've got Boris Karloff as the monster in Frankenstein, the Legacy collection. It's also got The Bride of Frankenstein, The Ghost of Frankenstein, all the sequels. Next up, we have, of course, Bela Lugosi as the legendary Dracula in perhaps the most iconic portrayal of the Count ever. And of course, included in this is also Dracula's Daughter, the sequel, which I actually really enjoyed. Okay, folks, now we're moving on to the zombie horror. And the mother of all zombie films, the one that started it all for the modern horror zombie, and that is George A. Romero's classic Night of the Living Dead. Still scary to this day. Next up, we have the equally excellent sequel, Dawn of the Dead, which is an absolute zombie horror masterpiece. Amazing, amazing film. Next up, we round off the Dead trilogy with George A. Romero's Day of the Dead. Incredibly awesome zombie film. I dare say it may be the best one. Next up is, of course, Return of the Living Dead, which injects a lot more humor into the zombie horror cinema, and it's so much fun. It's so hilarious. I love it. Return of the Living Dead. Next up is Re-Animator, starring Jeffrey Combs as Dr. Herbert West, and my absolute favorite horror performance, and one of the greatest movies in horror history. And then, of course, we have the sequel, which with another awesome performance by Jeffrey Combs as Dr. Herbert West in The Bride of Re-Animator. And then, of course, I have the DVD of The Walking Dead, the first season. We're now in the 8th season of The Walking Dead, and I followed it the whole time. So if you guys haven't followed Walking Dead yet, start with the first season. Next up, we have the Lucio Fulci zombie classics. This here is The Beyond, which many consider to be Lucio Fulci's finest film. It's an excellent movie, and this is an absolutely terrific Blu-ray. You have to add this to your horror collection, guys. Next up, another Lucio Fulci classic by the zombie master Lucio Fulci, and that is Zombie. Also known as Zombie 2 or Zombie Flesh Eaters. It has many names, but it's an absolutely awesome zombie flick. Next up, we have City of the Living Dead, another Lucio Fulci classic, and this has some absolutely brutal gore effects. Some of the nastiest stuff you'll ever see. City of the Living Dead. And we're going to round out the Lucio Fulci classics with House by the Cemetery, another amazing film. So brutal with the gore effects. And that's what the Italian maestro Lucio Fulci is known for. Next, we have the legendary classic of horror, The Evil Dead, starring Bruce Campbell, and this is directed by the great Sam Raimi, who also did the Spider-Man films. This movie is definitely a lot scarier than the rest. This takes it pretty serious. And then we have the equally great Evil Dead, which is considered by many to be one of the greatest horror sequels of all time. Dead by Dawn. Awesome, awesome movie. And we'll finish off the zombie collection with Resident Evil Trilogy. A lot of people don't like the Resident Evil movies, but I find them to be so much fun. It's just great action and horror mixed together. And I love watching Mila Jovovich kick some zombie ass. Okay, guys, that's it for the first of my zombie horror and horror film collection, my DVDs and Blu-rays. So join me next time for Volume 2. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.